Good afternoon, everyone, or maybe good morning for those of you who are doing this training in the morning. My name is David Simpson, the program director for Big Brothers Big Sisters of Tucson. Thank you so much for being with us today. We're going to be doing a training that's centered around positive youth development. This is a training that we have offered in person. I would always advise everyone that if you have an opportunity to do the training in person, it'll be very useful to you. Reason being, we get an opportunity to meet with other volunteers, get to hear their input, their advice, work and problem solve together on best ways that we can engage with our mentees, the best way to develop our mentees in a way that's going to be really positive. So, what is our agenda for today? We're going to talk about what is positive youth development. We're going to talk about the BIG's role in the positive youth development model, and then what does it mean and what does it look like to put positive youth development into action. So the question is, why are we here? What is the purpose of this training, and why is this training necessary? As I mentioned in the beginning, we want to continue to make sure we serve our mission, number one. We want to provide youth with an effective mentoring experience. And Big Brothers, Big Sisters' goal is to make sure that we always train and heavily support our mentors. So let's talk about the history of youth development in general. The previous model in youth development has normally focused on this idea of working specifically toward one specific risk factor. That risk factor might be substance abuse, violence, sexually transmitted diseases, lack of academic achievement, unplanned pregnancy, etc., etc. So the previous model of youth development is, okay, if a young person has a struggle in a specific field, or a young person has a struggle in a specific area, we need to put them in some type of program. We need to connect them with resources that directly identify and work on that specific area. If a young person struggles with drugs, you know what? We need to put them in a drug rehabilitation center, or we need to send them work with them on a program that's going to focus on drug abuse and why why it isn't good and what can happen in your life, etc., etc. While that model definitely had some positives to it, it definitely has some negatives. One of those things being the goal is not just to treat the symptom, but also the cause, right? If we have a child and he or she has a drug problem and we want to fix that drug problem, the goal is not just the drug problem itself, but the things that lead up to her or he having that issue. This is what is really powerful and exciting about the positive youth development model. So the question is, okay, David, what is the difference between the two? Well, positive youth development modifies that model and enhances it by saying, okay, we're not just going to focus purely on what the child struggles in. We're going to focus on developing their assets, number one. Number two, we're no longer going to pick one specific risk factor. Then number three, we're going to be providing youth support to successfully face challenges throughout their lifetime. In other words, positive development is saying we need to be sure that we build positive influences, positive assets, and a really strong foundational structure for our youth in their life. So this core belief allows us to build a child up on things they already do really well, remove negative factors that are surrounding them as much as we can, and then this will lead to that child maybe not being addicted to drugs. This will then lead to that child wanting to be more successful in school. So if we just look at the definition, positive youth development defines three things. It engages youth within their community in a positive and constructive manner. It recognizes and utilizes and enhances youth strengths and their assets. And it promotes positive outcomes for youth by providing opportunities, fostering positive relationships, and it promotes support for the youth's leadership and strengths assets. So, simply put, PYD is a mentoring approach that focuses on the youth's positive assets. And I've probably said this 4 times already, and that's okay because I really want you, as our greatest support, being our bigs and our mentors to our young people, to really keep that in your mental bank about what PYD really is. So, if we know PYD is this approach of focusing on the youth positive assets, the next question would be, what exactly are assets and what do we mean by that? So the definition of asset is, as you see on the PowerPoint presentation, a valuable person or quality in a young person's life. I really like this definition because it talks about an asset being 2 things, a person or a quality. In other words, we will have youth that might not have a lot of people. He or she might not have a lot of individuals in their lives that provides positive support, but that does not mean they do not have really good qualities that really makes them special. And we do believe here at Big Brothers Big Sisters that all of our young people are special. So these are why assets are important. The more assets, the more assets a young person have, the less likely youth are to engage in high risk behaviors. Remember what assets are. Assets are a quality that an individual has, or a person in their life, right? That's what we define as assets are. So, assets as. So, if we have a situation where a young person has really high qualities and we can identify those, and they have really positive support of their lives, we know that this leads to reduce risk factors or risk behaviors, according to the PYD model. Number 2, they are more likely to thrive. Assets have power for all youth. And again, assets are better predictors of success. I really like this last point because when we think about how successful can a young person be, oftentimes we take into account how bad, quote unquote, they are, how many mess ups they have, or what are the things they're doing wrong. And that's common normally. We look at a child and say, oh my goodness, they could be successful, but I doubt it. I'm going to predict that they're probably not going to be very successful because they don't listen, they don't pay attention, they don't do the things they've been asked to do, they don't take school seriously, etc., etc. But what happened if we could change their way of thinking and start thinking to ourselves, you know what? I still believe this young person can be successful. I believe they have a high probability of being successful because they got some great things going for them. My job now is to pull those things out. So let's look at external and internal assets. Again, this is really important. We know we know that assets are necessary. We know we need to build those assets. We know that if we can identify those assets, assets is what's going to help us really predict their ability to be successful and help them really thrive. But there are some things that there are 2 categories assets are broken down into, external and internal. External assets, we have a list for you here on family support, caring school climate, community that values youth, adult role models, positive peer influence, community involvement. By the very definition of the word external, you get an idea of what these assets are. Things that surround the young person, things that might be the environment that the young person lives in, or situations or individuals that the young person might be introduced to. These would be more of their external assets: what school they go to, where they live, their family outcomes, where their space between their friends they've been surrounded with, etc., etc. On the other side of that, we have something called internal assets. This is more or less the inside of the youth, right? Really trying to identify what assets does this youth have internally that I can bring out of them that I know can help them be successful. School engagement, caring, honesty, responsibility, restraint, decision-making, cultural competency, self-esteem, and a sense of purpose. A lot of these things we cannot touch, right? These external assets, how I like to think about it, are less tangible. But they are things that some of our youth come with more often than other youth, or there's some things that we can build. The question is, as a mentor, how do I help build their external assets, and how do I make sure they are improving and building on their internal assets? So this slide says, what are your little assets? Take a moment to think about that. If you have an opportunity, I would love for you to get a pen and a piece of paper if you have one next to you. This would be a really good exercise and time for you to write down what you believe your little assets are. This is huge because some of you might not have gotten to this point. You might have on a higher surface thought about, oh my goodness, my youth is really good at, thinking or working through certain processes, right? Like they very articulate, or they really pay close attention to detail. But you really haven't named it anything. You really haven't thought of it as a really good strength. And if that's the case, this would be a really positive exercise for you. Write down what you think your little assets are. Think of it in terms of external and internal. What things do they have externally going for them, and what things do they have internally going for them, or things that you think they tend to do well in? So once you have written down your little assets, the next question is, okay, how can PYD be put into action in my own personal relationship with my little? That's going to be the question. So let's look at this. Positive youth development in action. There are four things we want to highlight, right? And so mentors, you really want to write these down, or you really want to take notes of these four things, because it's going to be really important that we keep these things in mind when we're working with the little we have in our lives. Number one, staff and mentors focus on the youth's strengths rather than their deficits. We talked about this earlier, right? It is easy to be caught off guard, or to really focus your match relationship on what you can improve on in the child, because they don't do this well, which is okay. When you meet your little for the first time, it'll be at an introduction. In that introduction, the parent, guardian, the volunteer, and the PC and the child are going to go over goals. They're going to go over SMART goals. The parent guardian is going to have in his or her mind where they would like the child to be in that year. What deficits or what areas a child needs to improve in. So we sometimes start off from that point of, oh, they need to do this better. That's okay. What we're saying is, what we want to really switch our mindset to is, what does this child do well? What does this child get excited about? What gets this child really ready to move? Number two is, match conversations revolve around the little strengths or interests. This can be really tricky, right? Bigs or volunteers, because in your mind you might think, well, I do that anyway. True. What we're asking is, if you do it anyway, we want you to make it even more intentional, right? Because we not just want to talk about what they're good at, we want to talk about what they're good at and use that as a highlight to lead into how they can be better across the spectrum altogether. So, give you an example. If I know my child, my little, has trouble in, math. I know they don't like to do math. I know they're not good at it. I know they're getting these report cards back and the kid is struggling. How do I help with that? Right? Do I go and say, you know what, he or she needs more math tutoring? Possibly, but what if your child doesn't like math and don't feel like they're good at it? What if your child your little does not care to be in school at all, right? How do you get them to be engaged? This is why it's important to recognize their strengths, because what we believe in the positive youth development model is that focusing on their strengths and interests can help them see why it's necessary to improve in other areas, right? So, an example of this, we did have a mentee who, again, did not like math, did not really care for science, but was a really, really good in art. The big recognized he or she was good in art. They liked drawing. They liked telling a story. And so what the big was able to do was really try to connect those two dots for them, right? Give them a really sense of why art, understanding the that they believe they can accomplish. Then we can start working on some of those other areas. And we'll actually talk a little bit more about them when we talk about the 5 C's, right? So leave number 2 there, and we'll go into deeper about what that really means. Number 3 is mentors help facilitate meaningful participation for the littles. And number 4, mentors provide high expectation messages. I do want to spend some time on number 4 just a little bit, because mentors oftentimes say, David, I'm not sure where to start with my mentee, or I don't want to overstep bounds, right? Or I don't want to be put in a situation where I'm going against what the parent guardian says, or I disagree with the parent guardian, so I'd rather not even address these issues. All that can be fine. All that sometimes makes sense. However, you're in this program, you're matched with your little, because you are going to be someone in their lives that let them know that I advocate for you, I'm here for you, I'm here to support you, and you need to know that I myself, as your big, have high expectations for you. One thing we tell our mentors is always be really careful and be really mindful of having that separation, right? We've seen situations where the parent guardian has expectations, the little doesn't want to meet those expectations. They come to their big, and the big says, oh, no worries, I was bad in school too, it's no big deal. But that's not what we're looking for, right? We don't want a situation where when the littles and the youth come to their mentors and think, oh, well, my mentor really don't care about stuff like that. They just care about us having fun and just hanging out. That is part of the mentoring experience. But the other part of the mentoring experience is, no, there are going to be expectations. I do want you to go to school. I do want you to perform well. I do want you to make better decisions. I do want you to respect your parents. I do want you to pick better friends, because that is what mentoring is, right? We are always looking for volunteers in the community that are ready to give back to the community. And the question is, what am I giving back? You're giving back to them your positive experiences. You're giving back to them what things you overcame or what things you went through in your life that allowed you to be successful up to this point. These are the things that we want to share. These are the ideas we're looking to share with our littles. So let's have a quick review. We know what the old model was to youth development, this idea of focusing directly on the symptom, right? Focusing on what the kid did poorly and how to address that specific behavior. We know the PYD says, no, let's not just focus on what they do poorly, but let's focus on providing them with opportunities. Let's build positive relationships. Most importantly, let's build their assets. That's how we're going to make sure that our youth are really guided, and make sure our youth are really supported in such a way that we have long-lasting effect. Not just the bad things, quote unquote, but what things do they do well? We define those things they do well, or define those positive things going on in their lives as assets. The PYD model says we need to define their assets. So building the child's assets around them, their assets in their lives, will help them avoid risky behavior. So here we are again, not just changing the symptom, but changing the cause to the symptom. We define assets as a valuable person or quality in a young person's life. We mentioned that assets are broken up into external and internal assets. And then we went into why assets are important. After that, we covered what does it look like to put the PYD, the positive youth development, into action. Those 4 things again were staff and mentors focus on youth strengths rather than deficits. We have matched conversations revolving around the little strengths. The mentors help facilitate meaningful participation, and the mentors provide high expectation messages. So now that we did that quick review, let's have some fun. This says it's time to put these skills into practice. Yay! Yay! Shh! Shh! Yay! Yay! That's actually my definition of clapping and the little sidetrack, but it really kind of corny. Okay, here we go. So let's read an example, right? And again, I want you to think about this. And like I said before, it's always ideal for you to be able to take this training in person because it'll definitely allow you to get some feedback. However, we're going to still, this will still be very beneficial to you. So let's read about Benny. Benny is a 16-year-old boy that has lived on the streets of Pittsburgh for 14 months. He sleeps under a bridge and relies on an adult friend from whom he engages in prostitution in exchange for protection. He ran away from home when he was 14 to escape severe physical abuse by his mother's live-in boyfriend. He entered the drop-in center with a backpack that was filled with pieces of paper and a bunch of pencils in pretty shabby condition. He refused to accept food or clothing from the staff unless he was able to provide something in return. He drew a picture of the center as it was on that day, full of people doing lots of different things. So mentors, think about this. If you went through your interview and you explained to us that you want to work with a teenager and you're excited about working with older youth, we matched you up with Benny. You and Benny went in and you started to try to gauge with Benny what he likes, what he enjoys. What would be your first day? What would your first couple of weeks or your first couple of mentoring hours look like with Benny? That's the question you have to ask yourself. We know Benny is 16, so he's more on the older side, right? We know Benny has been homeless, living in the streets of Pittsburgh for almost 14 months, living under bridges. We know Benny has been engaged in prostitution just so he can feel protected. We know Benny has been away from home. We know that he has gone through physical abuse. We know that Benny is in a lot of crazy situations. If you're not careful, you'll look at Benny and say, yeah, by the time this man is 30, he won't have a degree. He'll be out on the street asking for help. Not a lot going for him. But we know the PYD model says different. So under this model, we're not just going to look at all the crazy things Benny has gone through in just a vacuum. What we're going to do is look at it and say, you know what? What do we know about Benny? What is some good things we know about Benny? What assets does Benny have, and how can I build those assets? So let's take a look at one sentence that's really powerful in this scenario. We do know that Benny, at the end of this, says he drew pictures of the center as it was on that day, full of people doing a lot of different things. This is not abnormal, right? This is not unusual for Benny to go and draw things like this. Why? Because it says that even when he got to the drop-in center, he had a lot of paper and a bunch of pencils. So it seems as if Benny is some type of artist. It seems as if Benny likes to draw. So this is what this might mean. If I meet Benny and I know from jump some of the things that Benny has struggled with, what I want to do is find out, what does Benny like? What is his interest? What gets him excited? And Benny might tell me, you know what, I really like to draw. Haven't done a lot of it, haven't got a lot of practice into it, haven't had a lot of great experience with it. And we say, well, Benny, you know what, I'm glad you like drawing. Drawing is really good. There are going to be a lot of skills you're going to need to develop over time in order for you to be a really good artist. You know what? I want to take you to the museum. You know what? I want to get you connected with my buddy at the University of Arizona. He's an artist. He started as young as you. Think about this, mentors. This is why mentoring is so powerful, because we never match you with a child and just say, all right, good luck. Go ahead and get matched with that child. No. We interview you for an hour and a half. We interview that mentee for an hour and a half. And when our team matches those two together, it's always looking at the volunteer's strengths versus the child's needs. But this is why. Because we're hoping that through the assessment process, we have matched Benny with someone who has access to these resources, who is strong in the areas that Benny might be struggling in, who can provide really good support. So you think about that. You know what? Yeah, going to a basketball game would be really fun. It'll be engaging. It allows us to have a good time. But not a lot of talking can be done at a basketball game. Not a lot of talking can be done at the movies. Let me think outside the box. What can I do Where can I take Benny? What time can I spend with him? Who people can I introduce him with? What things can I surround him with? Because remember, we're building assets, right? What can I do that is going to allow his strengths to be even bigger? What can I do to really get his support base even bigger? What can I do to get him excited so he doesn't give up on life? Once I get him excited, once I can get him to a point where he wants to continue to do better, he wants to change his circumstances, then that's half the battle. Then we can work on what it means to do school and improve in other areas and making good decisions. Once I really find out and focus on the good things Benny has going for him. Benny might be really good at school if he was in school. Benny might be really good at a home if he had access to a home. We don't know what Benny might be really good at because he has been dealt such a bad hand. So this is a time for us to really focus on some of these things. We know Benny is not going to just be a freeloader. We know Benny is just not going to just ask for handouts. We know Benny is willing to do what's necessary from this from this story to at least try to make sure he does his part. That's something we can highlight. That's something we can hone in on. So, thank you for trying out that exercise. I hope it was helpful. We're down to the last part of our training here. We're going to talk about something called the 5 C's. This is really important, right? Because you and I now have spent close to 30 to 40 minutes talking about building up these assets. Again, they're internal and external. The question is, what does it look like? What things should I focus on to build up these assets? Do I just go and put them in front of a whole bunch of different people? Do I go to his parents and guardians and say, hey, y'all need to be a better external asset for Benny, right? Like, what does that really look like? So the YPD model says, the PYD model, the positive development model says, you know what? There's 5 things you need to work on a continual basis, and automatically we'll start to see internal and external assets increase. We'll automatically start to see the little improve in internal and external assets, and we know that internal and external assets does what? The more youth has internal and external assets in their lives, the more their risk factors decrease. So let's look at the 5 C's. So, 5 C's. 1 C is competence. 1 C is confidence. 1 C is character. 1 C is caring. 1 C is connection. Yes. We want to build the youth assets. We do that by working on every youth in our program through positive development through the 5 C's. And that leads to 2 things: positive youth outcomes and reduced risk. Positive youth outcomes and reduce risk. So, number 1 is competence. What is competence? Competence is positive views of one's actions in specific areas, including social, academic, cognitive, health, and vocational. So, if I am a mentor and I am working on what it looks like to develop competence in my little, there are 4 things we focus on. Number 1, finding things your mentee likes and supporting those interests. Number 2, finding things they do well and encouraging them to pursue those interests, hobbies, and activities. Number 3, helping your mentee see that the skills they have can be used in areas where they feel less skilled. And number 4, turning mistakes into teachable moments. I really want to focus on number 3 and number 4. Helping your mentee see that the skills they have can be used in areas where they feel less skilled. This is really powerful. And if you remember me talking to you earlier about number 2, I mentioned that we were going to focus on that a little bit more. There are some things our youth are really, really good at, and in their head, it doesn't always jump across the aisle. Case in point, let's take Benny, for example. Benny's really good at art, but he hates school. But there is a way for us to connect those dots, right? If we know that Benny is patient because he does art, if we know Benny pays attention to detail, then those are some things we really want to highlight to show Benny that part of being successful in school takes patience, takes paying attention to detail. So the conversation with Benny is, Benny, you have the skill set. Benny, you already have what's necessary. We just got to move in the right direction. We just got to provide you with more support. You're almost there. One of you might say, or, all my Lord will do is talk about how bad the teachers are. And that's okay. That's part of, that's oftentimes what we see in youth who struggle in school. Sometimes they don't know the material, or they're just not locked in and they're not focused. But the key is still saying, there are some things my little does well. I need to find a way how to connect this dots for them, right? If he's an excellent athlete, but he's not excellent in the classroom, I got to figure out a way how to connect these dots. I don't know if I need to go have him see other athletes. I don't know if I need to have him go meet with someone that can spend time with him knowing that he can't do one without the other. I'm not sure, but those are some of the things, mentors, that we really want to take a look into. And then the last piece on this competence is turning mistakes into teachable moments. That's really huge. We're there to support our young people. We're there to guide them through this growing experience, going into young adulthood. And a lot of what your responsibilities are is to make sure that we highlight and really hone in on sometimes the opportunities we have to let them know, hey, you didn't do that right. I know you messed up, but we're going to get back on this horse and we're going to try again, right? Really using those as teachable moments. Number 2 is confidence, an internal sense of overall positive self-worth and self-efficacy. This is really good. I really like the confidence portion of this, because a lot of youth, we see that a lot of our youth struggle in this area, right? A lot of things have gone through. A lot of things they have gone through over the course of their life that cause them to believe they can't perform at a high level, they can't succeed. The deck is stacked against them, but we're there to help them realize that's not the case. There's ways that we can develop confidence. Making sure your mentee has lots of support so they feel loved, valued every day, everywhere. Letting your mentee know that they have their own opinions and their ability to advise others. Being aware of your little's own difficulties and how their gender, age, racial background affects their confidence. And I just want to stop there for a moment and just say this is really important. If you read this sentence again, it says, being aware of your own little's difficulties. This is why, mentors, we talk about not always taking your little to places where you guys are at an event where you can't really engage. Engaging is really important, because you really got to get a sense of the things your little struggles with and the things they have to live with on a daily basis. Then number 4, exposing them to activities in the community they might not otherwise have access to. Okay, and the third C is connection. Connection being positive relationships with peers, family, school, and the community in which both parties contribute to the relationship. How do I develop connection in my mentoring relationship? We want to highlight 2 specific ways you do that. Number 1, creating opportunities for your mentee to feel like their voices are being heard, and helping your mentee feel that they matter and are an important part of their community. So this is really important. A lot of you have already done this really well. A lot of our mentors, actually, without even knowing it, sometimes build really strong connections. So I feel like you'll have a lot of fun with that C. Our 4th C is character, having respect for societal and cultural norms, standards for correct behaviors, and a sense of right and wrong. I just want to stop there real quickly and talk about this definition. This is really important, because what I've realized, also being in youth development for 10 years, is some youth have a skewed sense of what's right and wrong based on their surroundings, right? And so you might walk into a mentoring relationship and wonder, they have a really weird sense of values, or why would they think it was okay to do that? Or it's weird how they think about certain things. Don't be turned off by that, or don't be caught off guard. Sometimes, and we've all been through this some way or some fashion in our lives, depending on how we grow up or where we grow up, has a sense of how we move. So our goal in our program is to always make sure our youth come away with a sense of really a good foundation of having good character, and really moving throughout the community, really becoming really good citizens in the community. And so developing character is really important. We have three ways that we do that. If you don't approve of a friend or relationship or an activity, the mentor speaks out. Let your mentee know your values and explain why some behaviors are unacceptable. And make sure your actions align with your words. Remember, you are serving as a role model. Let's go back up to number 2. Let your mentee know your values and explain why some behaviors are unacceptable. That's really important. And one question was asked, well, what if my values are more aligned with me being a Christian? What if my little is not a Christian? How do I overlap that? Well, let's talk about that. When we say your values, it's not necessarily this idea of always your very core belief, right? As far as, well, this is what I believe in, this is not what they believe in. When we say values, we're talking more or less those things across the board that we know is necessary for someone to have good behavior, to make good decisions, to be aligned with what it looks like to be a good citizen in a community, right? What things are necessary for someone to be a good person, right? And so even if your religious beliefs might not always be aligned, there are things that there are values that that we should always be discussing, right? How to talk to people, how to treat people, being honest, being open, being clear, making good decisions, not taking things that are not yours. What does it look like to respect other human beings? Those are more or less the things that we always want to make sure that we're focusing on. And then the last C being caring/compassion. I like compassion better, and that just because it's a longer word. No, I'm just kidding. That's just to wake you up. But we're almost finished. So compassion, what does that look like? A sense of sympathy and empathy for others. Again, 2 ways you as a mentor can make sure you're working on compassion with your little. Modeling caring in your interactions with your mentee, family, and community. Caring mentors help develop caring youth. This is really important. When mentees see their mentors do caring things or show acts of kindness and show acts of compassion, these things oftentimes rub off on the mentee. Again, it goes back to that modeling, right? And then last but not least, encouraging mentees to join school boards, civic organizations, different faith-based programs, or to promote social justice and compassion. These are different ideas. And again, you want to keep it in the framework of your mentoring relationship and what you and the parent has discussed. But these are different things we can do to make sure that a young person is developing a compassion type character, a compassion type nature, so to speak. And you see this slide says the Search Institute's 40 developmental assets. If you receive this training, you also would have received by email this sheet. It's a double-sided sheet of paper. It has a list of internal and external assets, 40 of them total. And you really should look at those mentors because that'll give you an idea. Earlier, we asked you to think about what assets your child has, and sometimes that can be hard to do just off the cuff, right? But that list will allow you to look through some things and allow you to start thinking and say, oh, you know what, maybe my little does have some of these things. So finally, big takeaways. Positive youth development. It is a mentoring approach that focuses on the youth's positive assets. Number 2, the more assets, the less likely youth are to engage in high-risk behavior. And we can develop those assets by focusing on the 5 C's: competence, confidence, character, caring, and connection. So, again, positive youth development is always going to be about the assets our young people have, how we engage and improve on those assets. And again, we work to do that by the 5 C's. And mentors, I'm telling you, if we can pull this off for every young person that comes through our program, we can definitely make sure that they're engaging in good behaviors, and we're having less high-risk behaviors. And again, competence, confidence, character, caring, and connection are all things that we have as adults that we can make sure we instill in our young people as well. So last but not least, I want to end this presentation by saying thank you. I want to end this training by saying we here at Big Brothers Big Sisters of Tucson continue to very much appreciate all of you. You are great. You're awesome. You have dedicated your time and your energy to working with the youth here in Tucson, and for that we'll always be grateful. Continue to stay positive. Continue to rely on your program coordinators and their support that they give you. We are here to help you navigate through your mentoring relationship so that we can all reach our ultimate goal, which is to provide support and to help our youth and our community achieve great things. Thank you again for your time. You have a wonderful day.